My name's Jennifer Tucker, and my husband Brian and I own Moose Mountain Ranch, where we raise heritage livestock. Primarily we raise hand-spinning wool sheep, but we have a few goats. We have both Boer meat goats as well as some dairy goats.
Our operation, my husband and my operation, is called Annaroon's Sheep Company. We have about 125, 130 breeding ewes, approximately 5 main breeds with just a few periphery breeds that we're using for crossbreeding. They are unique to what you see around most of the other operations and most of the other sheep operations because they're all rare wool breeds, and our emphasis is a niche market with a hand spinning market. Yeah, we have an incredibly diverse market, or I like to think, and I'm continually diversifying that market. Right now, the predominant is with our fleeces and from the skirtings or the leftovers. And as far as the animal themselves, we sell breeding animals. We sell a lot of meat animals to a domestic market.
So here at Moose Mountain, what we do to market our sheep is we have a heritage breed. We are marketing for a niche market exclusively. I cannot be competitive with commercial size sheep or commercial production of those sheep. We have a pretty good little program. We compost our manure using water, and we also use mechanics. We have a skid steer that we turn the manure with regularly. We also monitor using a manure probe, a compost probe. And by doing that, we're able to know when it's done. We have a landscape company that comes and trades us out bedding, so fresh, clean bedding for our old compost. And so it works pretty well for everyone involved. Our manure pile is a constantly moving item on the farm. You can see this pile is middle of the way ready. It's still got some raw material on the outside. We water about once every 2 weeks, and we really saturate our piles. We build them up where they have a top center piece, and we even sometimes just take a hose right to the center, let it run for a couple hours, and then turn the pile to distribute the moisture. I don't think we could do it effectively without a skid steer. I do try to turn manure when wind is not blowing directly into my neighbor's laundry or into their open windows. And you do the best you can. They understand that.
When we remove the manure 2 or 3 times a year, what we do is we use a skidster or a little small bobcat. And because of the bulk of the animals, there's just too much to do with the pitchfork, even though we do use the pitchforks in the barns and in our Quonset buildings.
Here we are on a domestic well, which allocates us to use the water to water livestock. We've scaled back the size of our lawn and garden so we can accommodate them. Water quality is an ongoing issue. We do have a pond out back. We do not use it for any stock watering, and it's just right now being used in the back, and it's fenced off where the animals don't have access to it. The few times of the year that we actually get a lot of moisture, whether it comes in rain or snow, we do have our pens set on a slight hill, so things do drain away from the animals, and they drain away from water sources. So we're fortunate in that we don't have any contamination issues. We really use our skid steer heavily, both to direct water as well as to keep the manure cleaned out and to keep snow cleaned out. Being on a small acreage, dealing with mortality can be a big problem. So what we have to do is we do call the local renderer, and he comes out and he charges a fee and he disposes of that animal legally for us.
When we lose an animal, what many would call the mortalities of the product, you can't be into animals without losing animals now and then. Though I'm emotionally attached and I know most of the names of my animals, you still lose them. First, you might lose them during lambing. Anything that we know why they died, maybe they were stillborn, maybe something they came with, they were too large to be born or something, we know why they died. And what we actually do is we skin out the pelts. Anything that dies that we don't have a reason, we have a very good vet who comes down so that she can do a necropsy or take cultures. I bring in all animals at night, and again, that keeps them more safe from coyotes. I don't leave them in the pastures at night.
We very much control our pasture. Our animals get to go out to pasture more for mental and physical exercise, not for nutrition. Everything I feed comes from a bag or a bale, and I don't expect that pasture to provide any nutrients to my animals. So when we use that grazing, I'm allowing them to go out, run around, have a good time, and then come in after a short amount of time. I provide all their needs in their pens. And that's because if I were to allow them out all the time, I wouldn't have any grass. I've gone through and I've selected grass species that are actually low palatable. They'll nibble on it and they'll munch on it, but they're not going to eat it down so aggressively that it won't come back. Pasture management is something that should be at the forefront of every landowner's mind, whether you have animals or not. This is a resource that you have, and it's your responsibility to maintain. To me, if I look out at a pasture and I see weeds and bare spots and just death out there, it's to me like looking at an emaciated animal. To me, there's not a whole lot of difference. Neglect is neglect. And so you got to take care of your pasture and nurture it and know, oh, it's awful dry. I probably ought not turn those sheep out or turn those goats out on it because it may not come back. And yeah, hay is expensive. But sometimes you have to balance what it would cost to go and reseed that pasture and how many years of not using it at all would cost you. Not to mention you can get blowing dirt complaints from neighbors, and being a good neighbor is an important aspect when on a small acreage or an urban farm. You have to remember that every county is a little bit different in what they let you do and what they don't let you do. All of those things are easily accessible through your extension office. Your local extension agent can provide you information about how many animal units you can have and learn what the difference between an animal unit is. One cow is different than 5, 8, or 10 sheep. Different counties, they consider one goat an animal unit, and some consider 10 goats an animal unit. You need to find out how your county looks at this. Some small acreages have specific requirements about how many animals you can have total of each species. And then you also please recall that there is a difference between carrying capacity and the amount of animals that you're allowed to have on your place. Just because you can have 10 animals on your place doesn't mean that you've got enough grass to maintain those animals year-round. Flies aren't as severe of a problem with sheep as they are, say, horses and cattle. But because we commingle, I have horses on the other side of the barn, we do have that draw, and I try to keep the fly level down because I, again, try to be a good neighbor. In the summer, we have a fly mist system, so that's generally putting down about every 30 minutes. It gives 45 seconds of fly spray. That adds quite a bit of moisture. We do hose down the barn every day. That helps keep the moisture levels inside the barn elevated. Sheep, goat, alpaca, all the small ruminants have very dry manure. It's pelletized, a lot like a rabbit. And because of that, you don't have the wet, heavy manures, and you have to kind of negate that dryness with a little bit of moisture in the air for your creature comfort as well as for respiratory health of the animals.
The perimeter fence on our property is all what we call a field fence with a small square 4 to 5 inch squares and then a few hot wires on the top. Sometimes it's electrified, sometimes it's not. And what that does is keeps, for the most, it will keep neighbors' dogs out, or at least the smaller dogs. It will keep out coyotes for the most, though we do use llamas and burros for predator. In the pens around, I use cattle panels. Within the pens themselves, I'll use what we call a hog panel. It's maybe 30-some inches tall.
We do have a barn here. We have a 36 by 48 pole barn structure that we built for horses, and the sheep and goats have moved into. So what we've done is we have 3 12 by 16 foot stalls that we use primarily for lambing and for kidding, and so that they're the most protected. It's an insulated barn that we can enclose and close all the doors and keep things ventilated enough through the opening doors, but keep them locked into the barn to keep them dry and safe. We've chose to go with the porta-sheds, which are basically a mobile hog sheltering system, and they work really well for us. I will caution folks with a lot of goats that tend to climb. You want to make sure that the back window is secure. So with the porta huts, I've seen a lot of folks just use portable buildings, sheds, and homemade things that they'll throw together. And as long as the goats have a good dry spot to go, they're happy. But they've got to have someplace out of the wind that's dry. We use a variety of different beddings depending on what animals we're serving. The dairy goats seem to do best on just shavings, pine shavings. The guy that I get them from, he does a really nice job of making sure that they are pure pine shavings, so I'm not getting anything that could be toxic to the goats. The main reason we don't use deep bedding is because we're a small acreage. I need to get the manure out. I have people keep coming to see their animals that they keep boarded here. They want to see a fresh, clean, dry stall, so we keep that bedding turned regularly. We do have a significant number of predators here in this area, and fencing is the most effective method. If we can keep the predators from getting in, we really don't have a problem. Up till recently, I've maintained livestock protection animals. I've had both dogs and llamas, and we had better luck with the llamas than we did dogs. I've had dogs previously, but in a small acreage situation, the problem with livestock protection dogs is they tend to own more land than you do, and they want to patrol hundreds of acres, and keeping a very athletic dog in a fence you've designed for sheep can sometimes be difficult. If you decide that you're going to have a livestock protection animal, whether it's a donkey, a llama, or a dog, you need to consider your neighbors, because the llamas tend to be most passive. They're not going to be aggressive towards other people, and really, if they spit on someone, they're probably not going to injure them. Donkeys can be that next step up because they can kick and they can bite. And then your next level of liability is going to be that livestock protection dog. We're on a small acreage, and obviously that reduces how much time we can spend with our animals out in the open. So we really try to magnify the effect that we have through nutrition, and that's probably the biggest aspect. Drought years, Colorado and this entire area is so prone to drought, so we have hay markets that fluctuate pretty dramatically. So with that, securing feed is a huge aspect of what we do. We're constantly changing how we feed and water our animals. They've presented us with challenges. Animals walking in feed does nothing but destroy feed. So we've tried several different types of troughs, and I can't say that we found one that we love. Primarily we're using a commercial trough. They're pretty slick bottoms, so the animals don't like to walk into it. They'll sometimes put one foot in them, but there's no bar across them. They're really easy to flip over if you need to get the old grain out of them. It just makes it easy to keep them clean. Well, here on the Front Range, we actually have a very mild winter. We have a few days of intense snow and sometimes blizzard-like conditions. But our biggest concerns in the winter is wind. And our feeding program does not change from summer to winter because our animals are not getting anything from the pasture. So we don't really change our feeding program, but managing your hay so that the animals are able to eat it before it blows away is actually sometimes a challenge. Using feeders can be helpful.
Kian is a Wensleydale ram. He makes beautiful babies. But the thing, whenever you work with rams, you never touch them on top of the head, because to them that's a dominance. And because he is one of the dominant animals in the property, he continually hits, and it has developed kind of a mutation on top of his head where he continually hits. And this will be all bloody. Particularly as we go into the short days, he becomes more aggressive with the others. Whenever one handles the rams, I have a rule with all my interns right now that no one can go into the ram pen alone, just because as the days become shorter, they become more aggressive. I wouldn't advise anyone probably to handle this ram other than myself. I've raised him, but even I don't go into the pens by myself during the breeding season. They just are really rough. Their minds are on hormones, and that's about all that they're thinking about. Whenever we're housing rams, usually the normal fencing that we would use for ewes is not sufficient because they're always fighting, establishing dominance, and I try to put in a stronger fence, maybe even stronger than a cantle panel. Use livestock panels to hold them in, or a permanent fence. Particularly during breeding, you have to have the animals separated, because if you have two rams side by side, one ram will be in with the other ram, and they will fight, and they could kill each other. So you need housing to keep the rams away from each other, particularly during breeding season. Rams are not for the unexperienced. I have had several people come to me and say, my ram turned mean. Well, if you pet them and try to make them a friend, they're going to turn mean. When you're working with the young ram lambs, particularly if they're bottle fed, I try not to keep a bottle fed baby as a ram, because they lose the fear of the person. And even as a young animal, as they start coming and they start butting me, that's very cute if they only weigh 20 to 30 pounds. But once they get bigger, it's very dangerous. And so anytime they start hitting me as a lamb, I will slap their face. The only way I touch them is underneath their chin, not on top. And they learn from very young that I'm to be respected. And that is something that I have developed and what works for me. But again, rams are not for the beginner. How I handle sick animals, the best practice that one can do with sick animals is to have a sick pen or quarantine pen. You try to isolate them from the others.
If it's a contagious disease, they go to a closed quarantine pen, which is a 12 by 12 stall. On an operation this size, I have to do quite a bit of my own vet work and a lot of planning for that. And so the vet work that we do are standard vaccinations, which we do Clostridium perfringens, CD and T, which is Clostridium perfringens plus tetanus. There's a lot of folks that vaccinate for a lot more things than I have in years past, but that CD and T is really the essential one to have in any ruminant.
If you're buying an animal and bringing it onto your property, there is a strong likelihood that it will carry novel pathogens, maybe not anything that's of danger, but something that would be unique to your current animal population. So you put them in what we call a sick pen or a quarantine pen.
Any animal comes in, it is quarantined for a minimum of 28 days. It lives in an area that is separate, and they are fed last every time. You feed the healthy animals and the ones that you know are good, and then you feed the new ones or the sick ones last. It's a really hard habit because you want to go take care of that sick one first. But if you take care of the sick one, you may be carrying whatever it has to all of your animals.
Any recommendation when you're first starting is do some research, and that research, not just the internet, and it's very easy to go to the internet and start looking, but I would go and talk to someone, find a mentor or someone who has the breed that you want to work with, and follow them through their process. Ask questions by doing your internet research. So what do you do during breeding? What do you do for feeding? What are some of the idiosyncrasies of the breed, the unique things that you might not think of? There's a lot of information when raising these that you can learn from someone who does it that you will never find in a book, can be critical to your operation.
To me, the most important thing when you're doing small scale or hobby livestock ranching is you got to make it convenient, you've got to make it fun, and you've got to make it easy.